In the quiet town, the annual spring fair was always a day of pure joy. Cotton candy spun in sticky clouds, colorful paper lanterns swayed gently overhead, and the cheerful hum of carousel music filled the air. That morning, the sky had been a canvas of clear blue, the soft air carrying the sweet scent of blooming dogwood trees. Aubrey Bennett, dressed practically in her bright raincoat and well-worn sneakers, expertly guided her preschool class through the vibrant rows of booths. Her long blonde hair, braided loosely and tucked behind her ears, framed a face etched with gentle responsibility. She clutched a clipboard, its pages filled with children's names and emergency contacts, her eyes constantly scanning the lively group. Little Luna, 5 years old and radiant in her favorite pink dress and flower-covered rain boots, skipped ahead, a small plastic cup of lemonade clutched in her tiny hand, drawn toward the distant puppet show tent. "Stay close, sweetheart," Aubrey called, her voice firm yet tender, a loving anchor in the bustling crowd. Then, without warning, the sky cracked open. It happened in an instant, a blink of an eye. Thunder roared with no preamble, and within seconds, ice began to fall from the heavens, sharp, fast, and heavy. The joyous symphony of the fair dissolved into pandemonium. Parents instinctively grabbed their children, vendors frantically scrambled to shield their precious wares, and teachers shouted names into the rapidly rising wind, their voices tinged with growing alarm. "Hail! Everyone inside the Civic Center!" A voice boomed urgently over a loudspeaker, cutting through the chaos. Aubrey spun in a desperate circle, her gaze darting, counting heads with a rising dread. Cameron, Sophia, Nolan. "Where's Luna?" Her chest tightened, a cold vice clamping down on her breath. Luna, the small, pink-clad figure of her daughter, was nowhere to be seen. Aubrey's heart plummeted, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated panic surging through her veins, stinging her eyes not from the hail, but from an overwhelming fear. She pushed with frantic determination through the surging crowd, her voice raw as she called her daughter's name again and again. Unbeknownst to her, a block away, the tinted windows of a sleek black SUV glided silently down, pulling to a slow, measured stop near the edge of the park. Jackson Wolf, a formidable CEO, had just emerged from a high-stakes investor meeting at the nearby Civic Center, planning a brief, contemplative walk before returning to his demanding office. But now, through the blurring curtain of falling ice, something small and distinctly pink caught his discerning eye. A little girl. She was curled tightly beneath a park bench at the very edge of the path, her small arms wrapped over her head, her knees drawn in close to her chest. Hailstones the size of marbles bounced relentlessly off the cold concrete around her, each impact a small, sharp explosion. Her tiny body shook with an uncontrollable tremor. Jackson didn't hesitate. Instinct overrode all thought. He shoved his car door open, ignoring the painful pelting of ice, and sprinted across the street, his powerful strides cutting through the storm. The hail pounded mercilessly against his broad shoulders, and back as he dropped to one knee beside her, his expensive suit already soaked. "Hey," he said, his voice surprisingly low yet clear, a calm in the storm. "You're okay now." Wide, innocent blue eyes peeked up at him, brimming with fear. Her small lips trembled as she spoke. "I lost my mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the storm. "It's all right, sweetheart. I've got you." Jackson, without a second thought, shrugged off his fine wool coat, its warmth already dissipating in the cold, and wrapped it carefully around her small, shaking frame. He lifted her gently into his arms, feeling the fragile weight of her trust. Her tiny fingers, surprisingly strong, clung to his collar, and her face pressed against his shoulder, finding a desperate comfort there. Once safely inside the cavernous SUV, Jackson immediately turned up the heat, the warmth slowly permeating the chilled air. He carefully buckled her into the passenger seat, then draped a soft, dry blanket over her, a cocoon of security. She looked at him, her cheeks still flushed from the cold, her damp blonde hair clinging to her forehead. Then, barely above a whisper, she spoke words that would alter the course of his life. "My mom used to tell me about you." Jackson blinked, a jolt of confusion, and a strange sense of déjà vu piercing through him. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. She smiled shyly, a tiny dimple appearing fleetingly in her left cheek. "She told me stories about a man who was brave and kind. I think it was you." For a long moment, Jackson was speechless, a profound stillness settling over him. Outside, the hailstorm continued its fierce rampage, battering the roof of the car with relentless force. But inside, something deep within his chest stirred, a long dormant emotion awakening with a jolt. That voice, that small, trusting face, something about her felt hauntingly, undeniably familiar. He glanced again at the little girl beside him, his mind racing. What stories had her mother told? And why did he feel an eerie sensation, as though he had heard her voice somewhere, once, on a quieter day, in a different, forgotten life? He didn't know her name. Not yet. But somehow, with the wisdom of a child, it felt like she already knew him. The hallway outside the community medical center buzzed with a chaotic symphony of voices. Nurses calling out names with a practiced urgency, children crying with weary frustration, and parents speaking in hurried, hushed tones, their anxiety palpable. Aubrey pushed through the crowd, her breath shallow, her eyes darting frantically through every open doorway and around every sharp corner. "Excuse me," she said to a passing nurse, her voice tight with suppressed panic. "My daughter's missing. Luna Bennett. 5 years old. Blonde hair, pink dress. We got separated during the hailstorm." The nurse, with a calm efficiency born of experience, scanned her clipboard, then nodded reassuringly. "Room 7, straight down the hall, then a right. She's safe. Safe." The single word resonated with the force of a prayer answered, nearly bringing Aubrey to her knees with overwhelming relief. She stumbled forward, her feet moving on instinct, a surge of adrenaline propelling her through the last few feet. When she reached the doorway of room 7, she stopped abruptly, her breath catching sharply in her throat. Through the small, clear glass window, she saw him. Jackson Wolfe. He sat awkwardly on a small, utilitarian plastic chair, hunched forward, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he patted dry the damp curls of the little girl in front of him. His expensive gray suit jacket, once impeccably tailored, was now draped carelessly over the back of the chair, its sleeves visibly damp and wrinkled from the storm. His tie was loosened, a stark contrast to his usual corporate precision, and his pristine white shirt clung to him in places, damp from the rain that had infiltrated even his powerful SUV. But it wasn't his disheveled appearance that struck Aubrey so profoundly. It was his face. Gone was the polished, unreadable executive expression she remembered, the mask of controlled ambition. Instead, his eyes were focused, deeply tender, a softness she hadn't seen in years. His brow was furrowed not in concentration on a deal, but with quiet attention, as if nothing else in the world existed but the child before him. And Luna, her daughter, sat calmly beneath his touch, her eyes closed, radiating a profound peace, utterly trusting. Aubrey, almost numb, stepped into the room. "Mommy!" Luna cried, her voice a joyous explosion, as she sprang from the chair and threw herself into Aubrey's waiting arms. "This is the man from your stories, right?" The innocent sentence hung in the air, hitting Aubrey with more force than any thunderclap. Every word a shockwave. She froze, her mind reeling. She had never uttered his name. In 5 long years, she had told Luna only fragments, veiled tales, stories of a kind man who had once made her laugh, who had once filled her world with promise, only to vanish abruptly. A man who never knew the profound legacy he had unknowingly left behind. And now, that very man stood before her, his gaze already meeting hers. Jackson looked up, his eyes locking onto Aubrey's. For a moment, time fractured, shattering into countless suspended fragments. The air between them thickened, heavy with the weight of 6 years of unspoken memories, lost moments, and profound questions. "Aubrey," he said softly, her name a ghost whispered from his lips. She felt her heart stutter, skipping a beat. Then, too. "Hi." A profound silence stretched between them, laden with the unsaid. Luna, oblivious to the swirling undercurrents, clung tightly to her mother's side, watching the two adults with wide, innocent curiosity. "You still wear your hair the same," Jackson observed after a moment, his voice quieter, laced with a wistful recognition. Aubrey instinctively reached up, her fingers brushing one of her braids. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she whispered, her own voice barely steady. "Not like this." Jackson slowly stood, his tall frame uncoiling. He seemed broader, more substantial than she remembered. Or perhaps time had simply imbued him with a greater presence. He looked the same, yet not older, but undeniably more grounded. His raw ambition softened by something else. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his concern genuine. "I am now," she whispered in response, squeezing Luna close, finding solace in her daughter's presence. Jackson's gaze drifted to the little girl, a flicker of something deep and unreadable crossing his features. Aubrey could see the gears turning in his mind, him trying to piece together the fragments of memory and resemblance, but he held back the inevitable question. "Not yet," she thought, a silent plea to the universe. She instinctively stepped back, putting a small but significant distance between them before any of the raw, surfacing emotions could fully manifest. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "For helping her." Jackson gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, his eyes lingering on Luna for a second longer, a deep curiosity burning there. Then his gaze shifted back to Aubrey, a complex mix of recognition and unspoken questions behind them. Without another word, Aubrey turned, her hand gently guiding Luna toward the hallway, a silent retreat from the overwhelming intensity of the moment. The crowd in the medical center had thinned significantly, but Aubrey's heart still pounded a relentless rhythm against her ribs. She couldn't resist. As they reached the corner, she looked back. Jackson was still standing in the exact same spot, his tall frame silhouetted by the warm light spilling from the room. He hadn't moved, and something in that profound stillness, that unwavering presence, told her with absolute certainty that this wasn't the end of their story. It was unmistakably only the beginning. The very next afternoon, a simple message appeared on Aubrey's phone screen. "Coffee," it read. It was from Jackson. Aubrey stared at the single word for what felt like an eternity, far longer than she needed to. 6 long years had passed since they last spoke, and yet the sheer weight of that one word, appearing so unexpectedly, could still make her chest tighten with a familiar ache. Finally, with a deep breath, she agreed. They chose to meet at a small cafe by the lake, a place that had once been their favorite, a sanctuary back in the days when their world felt new, full of boundless possibility and the sweet promise of maybes. It hadn't changed much, a comforting constant in a world that had moved on. The same lush ivy still climbed gracefully up the weathered sidewalls, clinging stubbornly to the brick. The same creaky chairs, worn smooth by countless patrons, still lined the charming porch that overlooked the shimmering expanse of water. Jackson arrived first, a solitary figure seated outside beneath a pale green umbrella, his presence a blend of anticipation and apprehension. He stood respectfully when Aubrey approached, his hand instinctively brushing the back of his neck, a nervous habit she remembered all too well. betraying his inner uncertainty. "Aubrey," he greeted, his voice soft, almost hesitant. She offered a polite, somewhat stiff smile. "Hey." They sat, ordered their drinks, and for a long while, their conversation revolved around trivialities: the lingering effects of the hailstorm, the unpredictable autumn weather, the recent reopening of the town's rebuilt library. Polite, safe, meaningless words. But silence, in its own persistent way, has a knack for tugging at old threads, unraveling the carefully constructed facade of the present. And soon enough, the careful words gave way, painstakingly, to the unvarnished truth. "It was 6 years ago," Jackson began quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of memory. "Feels like a lifetime. Or 10. Aubrey looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," she admitted, her voice a whisper. He hesitated, then continued, his gaze distant. "Back then, I was building something. Or at least trying to. My entire focus was on the company, on making it a success. My pitch deck was practically a second language, and the investors were circling like sharks, hungry for a piece of the pie. New York wanted me, calling with promises of grandeur." She nodded slowly, a ghost of a memory flickering in her eyes. "I remember. I told myself I had to go," he went on, his voice a low rumble. "That if I didn't make it happen then, I'd lose everything. But I didn't see what I was already losing." Aubrey remained silent for a long moment, the unspoken pain hanging between them. Then, softly, she said, "We never really ended, did we?" He shook his head, a gesture of deep regret. "No, I think I just disappeared. Thought I was doing the right thing. The smart thing for my future. You didn't even say goodbye." "I know." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the deep regret that still lingered. "I told myself it was just temporary. That once things settled, once I achieved success, I'd come back. But I didn't. I wasn't brave enough to face you. To face what I had done." Aubrey looked out toward the lake, its surface shimmering with the reflection of the sky. Clouds drifted lazily across, like thoughts that refused to stay in one place, mirroring her own unsettled mind. "You meant something to me, Jackson," she said finally, her voice imbued with a quiet sorrow. "But maybe we were never meant to be a story that finished." He looked at her then, truly looked, his gaze searching, vulnerable. "You were important to me too, Aubrey. More than I admitted, even to myself. I just wasn't man enough to protect that, to fight for it. I thought I had to choose between love and success. And I chose wrong. A tragic, unforgivable mistake." She said nothing, but her eyes softened, a flicker of understanding replacing the guarded hurt. Then, with a heavy sigh, he recounted what had transpired in his life since she last knew him. 2 years ago, he began. The company nearly folded. An investor, one I had placed all my trust in, pulled out at the absolute worst moment. My accounts froze, articles surfaced, tearing my reputation apart, painting me as a failure. His voice was raw, tinged with the memory of that crushing defeat. My wife, Callista, left within weeks of the collapse, taking her ambition with her. Our son, Miles, had just turned 1. A profound sadness settled over his features. I remember holding him, this tiny, innocent boy, and realizing I didn't know how to be a father. I was a mess, completely broken, but he needed me. So I figured it out. I had no other choice. Aubrey listened intently, her hands unconsciously cupped around her warm mug, a silent testament to her empathy. I told myself I had to go, he went on, his voice a low rumble. That if I didn't make it happen then, I'd lose everything. but I didn't see what I was already losing. Aubrey remained silent for a long moment, the unspoken pain hanging between them. Then, softly, she said, "We never really ended, did we?" He shook his head, a gesture of deep regret. "No, I think I just disappeared. Thought I was doing the right thing. The smart thing for my future. You didn't even say goodbye." "I know." She paused, a moment of profound vulnerability, then added gently, "But I used to tell her stories about a kind man, a man who once made me believe the world had something good in it, something worth fighting for." Jackson didn't speak, his jaw clenched as though he were holding back a question that he could not yet bring himself to ask, a question that hung heavy in the unspoken air between them. They paid their bill, the mundane act a stark contrast to the emotional weight of their conversation. As they stepped off the cafe patio, a small, vibrant figure darted toward them. Luna, who had been playing nearby with a stack of picture books, a beacon of innocent joy, ran up to them. She reached into her little backpack, pulling out a small, flattened sprig of lavender, its delicate fragrance still discernible. "This is for you, Mr. Jackson," she said proudly, her voice ringing with the unself-conscious confidence of a child. "Mommy said you liked this smell." Jackson blinked, genuinely stunned by the unexpected gift and the profound accuracy of Luna's words. He took the fragile flower from her gently, his fingers tracing its delicate outline. "I do, sweetheart. I really do." A wave of memories washed over him. Aubrey, in college, using dried lavender as a bookmark in her textbooks. How that distinct, comforting scent used to cling to his hoodie long after she had hugged him goodbye. As Luna skipped ahead, humming a cheerful tune to herself, Jackson stood still, rooted to the spot. The sprig of lavender was pressed firmly between his fingers, a powerful conduit to the past. Some wounds, he realized, had never truly closed. But some memories, precious and enduring, had never faded, and maybe, just maybe, some scattered pieces still belonged together, waiting patiently to be reassembled. The day after the sudden hailstorm, Aubrey received an urgent email from the school board. Classroom repairs, it stated, would necessitate at least 48 hours of work. The beloved preschool, where she taught, her anchor of stability, would be closed for 2 full days. She sighed, a weary breath escaping her lips. Glancing at Luna, who was happily twirling in her pink dress across the living room, humming a tuneless melody, oblivious to the new logistical challenge. Aubrey had initially planned to stay home with her daughter, a rare luxury. But that very morning brought an urgent and unexpected complication. A district-wide emergency budget meeting. As the lead early education representative, her presence was not merely optional, it was indispensable. Scrolling through her contacts, a growing sense of desperation forming as she considered who to ask for help, fate, in its own subtle way, stepped in. At the vibrant children's bookstore downtown, a place of comforting routine, she and Luna quite literally ran into Jackson Wolf. More precisely, Luna, with her boundless energy, ran headlong into Miles. "Hey!" Luna squealed, her voice a joyful explosion. "You!" Miles, initially startled, blinked, then a wide smile broke across his face. "From the park." They threw their small arms around each other in an enthusiastic embrace, like long-lost friends reunited. Jackson, who had been crouched beside Miles, engrossed in a dinosaur book, slowly rose as he saw Aubrey. His expression was unreadable, a carefully constructed mask, but not unkind. "We meet again," he said, a faint irony in his tone. Aubrey offered a small, tentative smile. "Looks like the kids already know each other." "They do," Jackson confirmed, his gaze softening as he watched the 2 children. "Park buddies, I guess." Luna and Miles, already deeply engrossed, plopped down onto the carpet, their heads together as they eagerly flipped through a pop-up book. Aubrey hesitated, A moment of internal debate before admitting, "Luna's school is closed after the storm. I have a board meeting this afternoon. An emergency one. I was just trying to figure out childcare. Trying to juggle everything." Jackson looked from the children to Aubrey, then back again. "If you trust me," he offered, his voice surprisingly gentle, "I can take them both. They clearly get along, and it would be no trouble." Aubrey paused, her mind racing, every fiber of her being screamed to say no, to maintain her carefully constructed distance, to keep her precious secrets safe and guarded. But Luna was beaming, her eyes full of unadulterated hope, her small face radiating pure joy at the prospect. And Jackson, normally so guarded, so formal, looked almost tender. "Just the afternoon," Aubrey conceded, the words barely out before she regretted them. "I'll bring them back by 5, he promised, his voice earnest and reassuring. The small zoo just outside the city was quiet, a perfect haven for 2 excited children and a man trying desperately to remember how to laugh again, how to simply times be asterisk. Luna, uninhibited and joyful, immediately grabbed Miles's hand as soon as they passed through the main gates. They ran from one enclosure to the next, their voices echoing with delight as they pointed at majestic lions, enormous elephants, and graceful giraffes. Luna, with her boundless imagination, named the animals as if they were characters in her own fantastical fairy tale. Miles, shy by nature, followed her exuberant lead with a wide, infectious grin, drawn out of his shell by her magnetic energy. Jackson sat nearby on a shaded bench, sipping lukewarm coffee, a rare smile gracing his lips. His son was truly smiling, in a way he hadn't seen in months. A genuine, unburdened happiness, and Luna, with her vibrant spirit and curious questions, felt oddly familiar, her very presence a comforting echo. As they ate their ice cream, Luna turned to him, her eyes wide with innocent sincerity. "Mr. Jackson," she asked, her voice soft but direct, "have you ever loved someone so much that you still remember them all the time?" Jackson paused, the unexpected question catching him off guard, stirring old, buried emotions. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice tinged with a wistful sadness. "And I think I never stopped remembering." Luna nodded, a profound understanding in her young eyes. "That's how Mommy is," she affirmed. "She remembers someone, too." He didn't ask who. Later, when heavy clouds rolled in, threatening another storm, he quickly brought them to a cozy bookstore nearby, seeking refuge from the impending weather. While the kids happily settled into a vibrant reading corner, engrossed in colorful pages, Jackson wandered aimlessly through the quiet aisles. At the very back, tucked away on a forgotten shelf, he found a quaint wooden display of art supplies. One particular box caught his eye, a beautifully carved set of colored pencils, its smooth wooden lid begging for a personal touch. An engraving option was offered by a small handwritten sign. He didn't quite know why he felt compelled to buy it. Perhaps it reminded him of Aubrey, who used to collect similar boxes in college, her artistic spirit always finding beauty in simple things. He asked the clerk to engrave the lid with 2 simple words: Luna's World. In the car, as they headed home, he gently handed the thoughtful gift to Luna. She gasped, her eyes wide with unadulterated joy, and hugged the box tightly to her chest. "I'm going to draw everything I love," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "This is my favorite thing ever." On the drive back, both children eventually succumbed to the day's excitement, falling fast asleep in the back seat, their heads leaning together in comfortable camaraderie, their mouths slightly ajar in innocent slumber. Jackson glanced in the rearview mirror, his gaze falling upon them, and froze. There was something undeniably striking about their features, their brows, their chins, and the way Luna tilted her head in sleep. A subtle, unconscious gesture was unsettlingly, profoundly, just like him. A cold flicker of suspicion, an insistent, unwelcome thought, passed through him, chilling him to the bone. Coincidence, he tried to tell himself, desperately clinging to the rational. He pulled into Aubrey's driveway as the sky, still bruised from the earlier clouds, turned a soft, golden hue. She opened the door, her expression a mix of surprise and palpable nervousness. "They were perfect," he said softly, his voice imbued with genuine warmth. "Thanks for trusting me." Aubrey looked torn, a battle of emotions playing out on her face, then managed a small, tentative smile. "Thank you for giving her such a good day." That night, Jackson sat beside Miles's bed, gently tucking him in, the comforting routine a balm to his turbulent thoughts. The boy looked up, his eyes heavy with sleep, already half in dreamland. "If I did something wrong in the past," Jackson asked quietly, his voice a mere whisper, wrestling with his guilt, "would you forgive me?" Miles didn't answer in words. He simply rolled over, wrapping his small, trusting arms around his father's neck, a silent, powerful embrace. Sometimes, Jackson realized, forgiveness didn't need words. Jackson sat in his home office late into the night. A quarterly report lay open before him, its pages filled with numbers he had not read, not a single line. His mind was elsewhere, circling relentlessly, obsessively, around a little girl in a pink dress. Luna's innocent laughter still echoed in his ears, a beautiful, haunting melody. There were too many things about her he couldn't ignore, couldn't explain away as mere coincidence. The way she tilted her head when she was curious, an exact replica of his own gesture. The way she furrowed her brow in focused concentration, a familiar intensity. The quiet habit of unconsciously turning a ring around her thumb when lost deep in thought. He did the exact same thing. And her voice, echoing those impossible words. "My mom used to tell me about you." That line had lodged deep in his chest, a barbed hook, refusing to be dislodged. 6 years ago, Aubrey had vanished from his life. 5 years ago, Luna was born. The timeline, chillingly, perfectly matched. He pushed the corporate report aside, its numbers suddenly meaningless. The figures could wait. The truth, however, could not. The next morning, Jackson visited Luna's preschool, adopting the pretense of delivering a substantial corporate donation for classroom supplies. He wore his usual tailored suit and a calm, practiced smile, playing the role everyone expected of the successful CEO. But the moment Luna saw him, her face lit up, and she ran into his outstretched arms, a blur of pink and uninhibited joy. "Mr. Jackson!" she exclaimed, her voice ringing clear. He knelt, hugging her close, breathing in her sweet, innocent scent. Over her small shoulder, he saw Aubrey frozen in the doorway, her expression a complex mix of surprise and fear. Utterly unreadable. A nearby teacher, observant but oblivious to the simmering drama, chuckled warmly. "You two look alike," she remarked, a casual observation that hit Jackson like a punch to the gut. Same eyes, same smile. It's uncanny. Jackson saw the fleeting flicker of panic across Aubrey's face, as she quickly redirected the conversation, gently guiding Luna away. But it was too late. The words hung in the air. Undeniable. Searing. Jackson left the preschool without a word, his mind a whirlwind of dawning, terrifying realization. An hour later, he stood on Aubrey's doorstep, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Leaning casually against the porch railing was a small pink bike, its paint carefully, lovingly applied. On its side, painted in uneven, childlike letters, were the initials LW. His breath caught in his throat, a sharp, painful gasp. 6 years ago, Aubrey had vanished from his life. 5 years ago, Luna was born. The timeline, chillingly, perfectly matched. He pushed the corporate report aside, its numbers suddenly meaningless. The figures could wait. The truth, however, could not. He knelt, hugging her close, breathing in her sweet, innocent scent. Over her small shoulder, he saw Aubrey frozen in the doorway. Her expression a complex mix of surprise and fear. Utterly unreadable. Luna Wolf. Aubrey opened the door, her surprise quickly morphing into something closer to dread. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently, her voice tight with apprehension. "Yes," Jackson stated, his voice devoid of its usual calm. "It's about your daughter." She hesitated, a silent plea in her eyes. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket, a small, beaded bracelet Luna had dropped the day before. On its heart-shaped charm were two tiny, distinct letters. J.W. "No," Jackson whispered, his voice cracking, thick with regret. "You were the chapter I never finished. The one I foolishly abandoned." He stepped closer, his gaze desperate, pleading for honesty. "Tell me the truth. Is she mine?" Aubrey let the tears come then, hot and silent, streaming down her face. She gave a slow, silent nod. A devastating confirmation. Jackson inhaled sharply, a guttural sound of pain and shock. His legs nearly gave way beneath him, the ground seeming to tilt. All this time, he said, barely above a whisper, the enormity of the loss crushing him. "I had a daughter." Aubrey, her own voice choked with tears, quickly interjected. "I wasn't hiding her to hurt you, Jackson. I was protecting her. You were falling apart after your company collapsed. After Callista left, I didn't know if you'd even survive it. Emotionally or financially. I thought she'd only make it harder for you, a burden." He gave a soft, bitter laugh, a sound devoid of humor. "But she's the only thing that would have saved me, Aubrey. The only true anchor." He turned away for a moment, gathering his shattered composure, fighting for control. Then he faced her again, his stance steadier, his gaze resolute. "I need time," he said, his voice firm. "Not to forgive you, but to learn how to be a father to her. To learn how to make up for 6 lost years." He turned, slipping the beaded bracelet into his pocket, his fingers shaking with a mixture of grief and emerging purpose. Just as he reached the top of the steps, he heard a small, sweet voice behind him. "Mr. Jackson." He turned slowly. Luna stood there, a tiny figure clutching her lavender plush bunny, her eyes large and earnest. "Don't be sad," she said, her voice full of innocent wisdom. "Mommy says good people always find their way back to where they belong." His chest ached with a profound, aching tenderness. He knelt, brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. "I promise, Princess," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll come back." Luna nodded solemnly, a trusting acceptance shining in her eyes, and wrapped her small arms tightly around his neck. As he walked away, the setting sun painted the sky in streaks of gold, a fiery promise against the fading light. In his hand, he clutched the beaded bracelet his daughter had made. The first tangible piece of her he would carry with him. A symbol of a connection finally forged. A new chapter had begun. A chapter he vowed this time he would not walk away from. Jackson didn't rush. After learning the profound, life-altering truth, he moved slowly, deliberately, with an exquisite caution, not wanting to break something so fragile, so newly formed. He spent more time with Luna, every moment a precious rediscovery. He never called himself her father. Not yet. Instead, he listened intently, watched her every move, and learned everything he could about the vibrant, imaginative child who was his daughter. She painted clouds that resembled fantastical animals, made up whimsical stories about talking flowers, and asked insightful questions that lingered with him long after their conversations ended. "Do grown-ups forget people they love if they're too busy?" she once asked. "I promise, Princess," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll come back." Luna nodded solemnly, a trusting acceptance shining in her eyes, and wrapped her small arms tightly around his neck. As he walked away, the setting sun painted the sky in streaks of gold, a fiery promise against the fading light. He spent more time with Luna, every moment a precious rediscovery. Miles, too, underwent a quiet transformation. The shy boy, who once clung nervously to his father's leg, now ran with unbridled joy to greet Luna each morning, his face alight with excitement. They became inseparable, two puzzle pieces that had finally found their perfect fit. And Aubrey, in turn, became Miss Aubrey to Miles, a name he spoke with a kind of warmth that pierced Jackson's chest, a testament to her growing role in his son's life. Then, on a seemingly regular Tuesday, everything shifted. The fragile peace unexpectedly threatened. Jackson called Aubrey in a mild panic, his voice laced with uncharacteristic urgency. An emergency board meeting had been abruptly moved up, and his sitter, Rosalind, was hopelessly stuck in traffic across town. Miles had already been picked up from daycare and was waiting patiently on the steps, a small, solitary figure. "I'll go get him," Aubrey offered immediately, her voice calm and reassuring. Stepping into the breach. "He can stay with us until you're done." That evening, as dusk settled, Jackson arrived at Aubrey's cozy house. The front door was slightly ajar, a welcoming invitation. He stepped inside and stopped, a profound sense of peace washing over him. On the living room rug, Luna and Miles sat cross-legged amidst a joyful mess of Legos, their small hands diligently building something wonderfully odd and spaceship-like. Aubrey knelt beside them, her voice soft and melodious as she read aloud from a picture book, one hand resting gently on Miles's soft hair, a gesture of maternal affection. Jackson stood silently, his throat tightened with a sudden, overwhelming emotion. He hadn't witnessed a moment like this in years. Such unadulterated peace, such a tangible sense of belonging, of family. When Aubrey looked up and noticed him, she smiled, a genuine expression of surprise. But her demeanor was calm, settled. "They built that all by themselves," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride, nodding toward the lopsided Lego ship, a testament to their collaboration. He nodded, speechless, overwhelmed by the scene. Miles, seeing his father, immediately ran to him, wrapping his arms tightly around Jackson's leg. Then Luna, not to be outdone, joined in the embrace. Aubrey walked over, her voice soft and warm. She held 2 bowls of fragrant stew. "Hope that's okay," she said, a hint of domesticity in her tone. "It's perfect," Jackson replied, his voice husky with emotion. But peace, he knew, was fragile, and the shadows of the past didn't always stay buried. On a bright, sun-drenched Saturday, Jackson took the children to the bustling park. Luna, a whirlwind of energy, chased butterflies, her laughter echoing through the air. Miles, delighting in the simple pleasure, played on the swings, his face beaming. Jackson pushed the swing gently, a contented smile on his face, until a cold, familiar voice shattered the idyll. "Well, isn't this domestic?" He turned, his jaw tightening instantly. Callista stood there, impeccably dressed in heels and a designer coat. Sunglasses perched casually on her head, her arms crossed, her eyes flicking with pointed judgment from Jackson to Aubrey, who stood frozen nearby, her earlier serenity evaporating. "Miles," Callista cooed, her voice saccharine, an unsettling contrast to her cold gaze. "Come say hi to Mommy." The boy hesitated, caught between 2 worlds. Jackson instinctively stepped between them, his jaw tight, his protective instincts flaring. After an awkward, tension-filled moment, Callista pulled Jackson aside, her smile thin and predatory. "I want to come back," she declared, her voice laced with a dangerous resolve. "Miles is my son. He belongs with me. You left when he could barely talk, abandoning him." Her smile thinned further, a menacing glint in her eyes. "And now you're back in the headlines. Mr. CEO. Success looks good on you. I'm just here to complete the redemption arc, to reclaim what's rightfully mine." "You're not part of this story anymore, Callista," he said firmly, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. She stepped closer, her voice like ice, each word a calculated threat. "Then I'll fight for custody. The courts might like hearing about your emotional history, about your sudden breakdown 2 years ago, or the inconvenient fact that you've hidden a child from the public. A secret daughter. You're not exactly stable, are you?" Then, with a final, chilling glance, she turned and walked off, leaving a trail of icy dread in her wake. That night, the warmth, the fragile peace they had cultivated, was gone, replaced by a suffocating fear. Jackson told Aubrey everything, his words heavy with the weight of the new threat. She listened in silence, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face pale. Luna was sound asleep in the other room, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. "I knew something would come to take this away," Aubrey whispered, her voice raw with a deep-seated fatalism. "I won't let her, Aubrey," Jackson vowed, his voice fierce with resolve. "I'm not talking about her," she corrected, her voice breaking, the pain of past betrayals resurfacing. "I'm talking about us. I've seen how fast things fall apart, Jackson. I can't let Luna or Miles get caught in that, get hurt by our chaos." He stepped closer, his hand reaching for her, wanting to offer comfort, to bridge the distance. But she instinctively took a step back, erecting an invisible barrier. "I think we should put space between us for now," she said, her voice filled with a heartbreaking finality. Jackson's chest ached with a profound, searing pain. He wanted to argue, to fight, to pull her into his arms, and promise to make everything right. But the look in her eyes stopped him cold. She wasn't angry, not truly. She was simply protecting something she loved more than anything else in the world. Her children, and he realized for the first time that love wasn't just about showing up, not just about grand gestures or declarations. It was about fighting patiently, honestly, with unwavering integrity, for the chance to stay. Not just for legal custody, not for control, but for the elusive, precious commodity of trust. For them. For their burgeoning family. Jackson sat across from Callista in a sleek law office, perched high above the bustling city. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a foggy, indistinct view of the Manhattan skyline, a metaphor for the clouded moral landscape of their confrontation. Callista, resplendent in red lipstick and a smug expression, sat with her legs crossed, her manicured nails tapping a rhythmic, unsettling cadence against her designer handbag. "You always did look good under pressure, Jackson," she purred smoothly, a silk-laced venom in her tone. "But let's not pretend you're in control here." He remained stoically silent, his gaze unwavering. Callista leaned forward, her smile razor-sharp. Cutting through the tense air, she listened in silence, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face pale. Luna was sound asleep in the other room, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. "I knew something would come to take this away," Aubrey whispered, her voice raw with a deep-seated fatalism. "I won't let her, Aubrey," Jackson vowed, his voice fierce with resolve. "I'm not talking about her," she corrected, her voice breaking, the pain of past betrayals resurfacing. "I'm talking about us." "You mean the breakdown you walked away from, Callista? The one you abandoned me and Miles in?" "That's called survival, Jackson," she countered, her voice dismissive. "No," he said calmly, opening a folder and sliding it purposefully across the polished table. This is survival. Inside were documents, meticulously maintained therapy records, detailed parenting schedules, a glowing psychological evaluation report, even heartfelt references from Miles's daycare teachers, all prepared with a foresight and care that spoke volumes. Callista's smug expression faltered for the first time, a hairline crack in her perfect facade. And then came the final, devastating piece. "I wanted to keep this private," Jackson said, sliding over a tablet, its screen already displaying a video. But Miles asked to say something just in case. He pressed play. On the screen, Miles sat on his small bed, clutching his beloved stuffed fox. His voice, though soft, was clear and unwavering, resonating with innocent honesty. "Daddy always reads to me before bed. He makes pancakes on Sundays. Miss Aubrey helps me draw. I like our house. I don't want it to change again." Then, after a poignant pause, he looked directly into the camera, his small face filled with pure, unadulterated love. "I love my daddy." Silence. The lawyer beside Callista leaned over, whispering something urgent into her ear. Her jaw tensed, a muscle twitching. The smugness completely evaporated, replaced by a dawning, bitter defeat. "This isn't over," she muttered, standing abruptly, her composure finally shattered. "It already is, Callista," Jackson replied, his voice quiet but firm, a statement of undeniable victory. Rain fell softly, a gentle, cleansing drizzle, as Jackson stood on the steps outside Aubrey's house. The porch light, a warm, inviting glow, shone behind the screen door, casting Aubrey's silhouette in soft light as she cautiously opened it. She looked surprised and undeniably tired, her face etched with worry. "Is everything okay?" she asked quietly, her voice a fragile whisper. He nodded, a simple, profound gesture. "It's done. She's not coming after Miles. Or us." A wave of relief flickered across her face, momentarily chasing away the shadows. But it was quickly followed by a hesitant uncertainty. "And now?" Jackson stepped forward, his voice low and steady, infused with a newfound clarity. "Now, I've stopped letting fear write my story. I don't want another chance with the past, Aubrey. I want a future." His eyes searched hers, vulnerable and hopeful, an honest reflection of his soul. "And that future is you. It's Luna. It's Miles." He reached for her hand, the soft rain sliding down his face, mingling with unshed tears. "That's home," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're my home." Aubrey stared at him, her heart overflowing, then stepped instinctively into his arms, tears already streaming down her cheeks, washing away 6 long years of pain and doubt. She clung to him as if the immense weight of those 6 years had finally, miraculously, lifted from her shoulders. "I was so scared," she whispered, her voice muffled against his chest. "I didn't want to believe we could have this beautiful, fragile thing." "You don't have to believe alone anymore, my love," he whispered back, his voice raw with emotion. For the first time, there were no more secrets between them, no more distance, just pure, unadulterated love, raw and real, finally spoken aloud, finally embraced. Inside the house, Luna and Miles, drawn by the emotional crescendo, peeked through the living room window, giggling softly at the sight of their parents embracing in the rain, their innocent joy a testament to the magic unfolding. And just like that, the 4 of them were no longer disparate pieces desperately trying to fit. They were a whole, complete, and perfect. 6 months later, the garden behind their charming cottage in the verdant Vermont countryside had been lovingly transformed into something out of a storybook. Strings of golden lights hung gracefully from the white wooden fence, swaying gently in the soft breeze, their warm glow inviting and ethereal. Lavender, in full, fragrant bloom, lined the winding gravel path, its calming scent drifting lazily on the warm summer air. Chairs, elegantly adorned, lined both sides of the aisle, filled with the cherished few who had stood by them through the hardest, most testing chapters of their lives. At the end of the path, little Luna, radiant in her favorite pink dress, walked slowly with a child's solemn grace, scattering handfuls of delicate lavender petals from a woven basket. Her blonde curls bounced with each joyful step, her grin as wide and bright as the summer sun itself. Just behind her, Miles, proud and serious in his tiny suit, clutched a velvet box containing two simple, shining gold rings, his face a picture of determined responsibility. Today, he was his father's best man. At the altar, Jackson Wolfe stood waiting, dressed in a perfectly tailored slate-gray suit that mirrored the soft, tranquil sky above. But it was not the suit, nor his innate handsomeness, that truly made him striking. It was the way he looked, with an utterly profound and unwavering gaze, at the woman walking toward him. Aubrey's hair was braided gently down both sides, framing her face with a soft, ethereal glow. Her dress was simple, devoid of lace or sequins, just flowing white cotton that moved with her like the breeze, a testament to her natural beauty. Her eyes were full of pure, radiant light, her steps steady and purposeful as she walked, hand in hand, with her mother, who had once harbored doubts about Jackson, but now openly wiped away proud, happy tears. When Aubrey finally reached him, Jackson took her hands in his voice just above a whisper, brimming with a lifetime of unspoken emotion. "I never believed in second chances," he said, his eyes filled with a humble adoration. "But you, Aubrey, you were mine." The ceremony was beautifully short, intensely heartfelt. There were no grand, sweeping speeches, just vows written in quiet, reflective nights, exchanged beneath the open, star-dusted sky. When it was done, when the joyful cheers had faded into the soft strains of music and the gentle hum of laughter, Luna, ever perceptive, tugged at Jackson's sleeve. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft but imbued with an absolute certainty. He knelt beside her, his heart already overflowing with love. "I have a wish," he smiled, his eyes twinkling. "What is it, princess?" She leaned in close, her warm breath a soft caress against his cheek. "I wish we'll always be a family, Daddy, and never go away again." Jackson looked at Aubrey, who was now his wife, his anchor, his everything. Her eyes met his, filled with a deep love and a quiet, profound promise. He pulled Luna into his arms, holding her tight, pressing her close. "That wish," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "That wish already came true, my sweet girl." As night gently fell, the garden grew quieter, lit only by the soft, ambient glow of the lanterns and the joyful, unrestrained laughter of two children chasing elusive fireflies, their small silhouettes dancing against the twilight. Then came the final, poignant moment. Jackson stood between Aubrey and the children, each of them holding a paper lantern, its base flickering with a nascent flame, a beacon of hope. Together as one, they released them into the vast, darkening night sky. 4 lights rose, side by side, their gentle ascent mirroring their journey, drifting slowly, gracefully, toward the stars. From behind, they looked like a perfect portrait, frozen in time. 2 adults, 2 small silhouettes, all connected by something invisible, yet undeniably unbreakable. And as the lanterns eventually disappeared into the boundless darkness, a voice, imbued with wisdom and tenderness, echoed in the stillness, a final, profound testament. Some people, through life's hardships, eventually stop believing in love. Some, weary from the fight, simply give up on the very idea of family. But sometimes, miraculously, love finds you anyway. It can find you in the terrifying chaos of a hailstorm. It can reveal itself in the familiar, comforting scent of lavender. And sometimes, most powerfully, it can find you in the innocent, knowing voice of a child who didn't even know your name, but somehow, instinctively, knew your heart. The story, they knew, didn't end here, in this beautiful, tranquil garden. It had only just begun.